What if the greatest threat to American security strategy is not a sudden invasion of Taiwan or a hypersonic missile launch over the Pacific, but a silent power struggle unfolding inside Beijing, where loyalty is being elevated above competence, and where the world's fastest rising military power is being reshaped from the inside out? That is the strategic question now confronting Washington as Xi Jinping tightens his grip over the People's Liberation Army in what has become the most sweeping military purge in modern Chinese history. And this is not simply an anti-corruption drive or a symbolic campaign against bribery, but a structural transformation of command authority that has removed senior rocket force commanders, defense ministers, procurement chiefs, and theater-level officers at a pace that signals deep internal distrust within the Chinese Communist Party leadership. And when nearly half of key strategic positions experience turnover within a short window, the impact is not cosmetic. It reshapes decision chains, disrupts institutional memory, and alters how power is exercised in moments of crisis for the United States. This evolving reality demands a recalibration of long-standing assumptions about China's military readiness, because for years, American planners have modeled scenarios based on a steadily modernizing and increasingly professional PLA, capable of executing joint amphibious assaults, cyber operations, and long-range precision strikes, yet purges at the top create friction below as officers become risk-averse. Promotions hinge more on political alignment than battlefield competence, and innovation slows. Under fear of scrutiny, this paradox produces a dangerous duality. China's hardware continues to advance with aircraft carriers, stealth fighters, anti-ship ballistic missiles, and expanded naval patrols across the South China Sea, while its human command architecture may be temporarily weakened by mistrust and instability. And from Washington's perspective, that combination is unpredictable, because a confident professional military can be deterred through clear signaling and balance of power logic, but a politically pressured military whose leadership fears internal consequences may act defensively or aggressively in ways that complicate crisis management, particularly around flashpoints like Taiwan, where strategic timelines and domestic legitimacy intersect. Xi has publicly set modernization milestones tied to national rejuvenation narratives, including targets around 2027 and mid-century transformation goals, and any delay or embarrassment within the PLA could be perceived internally as a political liability, which in turn might incentivize symbolic demonstrations of strength such as increased air incursions, naval drills, or missile tests near contested zones. And that possibility is forcing U.S. defense strategists to consider whether deterrence must now account not only for China's capability, but also for its internal political psychology. In response, the United States is strengthening integrated deterrence across the Indo Pacific, deepening coordination with Japan, expanding defense technology cooperation with Australia, reinforcing logistics agreements with the Philippines, and accelerating joint training with India under strategic frameworks that signal unity without triggering premature escalation. Yet there is also a recognition inside the Pentagon that overreaction could validate hardline narratives within Beijing, that external containment justifies further consolidation of authority. Therefore, U.S. strategy must walk a narrow path projecting resolve while preserving diplomatic off-ramps, and this balancing act becomes more complex as direct military-to-military communication channels shrink due to leadership removals, because fewer trusted interlocutors mean higher risks of misinterpretation during incidents at sea or in contested airspace. And history shows that miscalculation between major powers rarely begins with grand intentions, but rather with fragmented information and compressed decision timelines. The current purge also intersects with China's rapid development of strategic forces, including its rocket units, which are central to anti-access area denial strategies aimed at deterring U.S. carrier groups and forward bases, and leadership turbulence within these units has raised analytical questions about readiness standards, command reliability, and training continuity, even as missile inventories expand numerically. And American intelligence assessments must now distinguish between visible capability growth and less visible operational cohesion. And this distinction influences procurement decisions, congressional defense budgeting, and force posture planning across Guam, Okinawa, and broader Pacific installations beyond the immediate Taiwan scenario. The purge signals a broader ideological tightening, where political loyalty is prioritized over technocratic independence, and that shift can affect long-term military innovation because breakthrough advancements often require decentralized experimentation and candid internal critique, qualities that may diminish under centralized control. If that trend holds, the United States could see a competitor whose modernization remains formidable, but whose adaptability narrows, creating both opportunity and danger opportunity. Because rigid systems are slower to evolve danger, because rigid systems under pressure sometimes lash out to prove strength, and American security planners must incorporate both trajectories into wargaming models, alliance consultations, and deterrence messaging. Moreover, economic and technological competition remain intertwined with military dynamics, as semiconductor export controls, supply chain diversification, and investment screening policies are shaped partly by assessments of China's defense trajectory, and a destabilized leadership environment inside the PLA could either slow advanced integration or intensify efforts to accelerate indigenous capabilities free from foreign dependence, and thus Washington's grand strategy cannot isolate military analysis from trade technology and diplomatic strategy. It must integrate them into a coherent framework that anticipates how internal consolidation in Beijing reshapes external behavior. And for U.S. audiences, the key takeaway is not that China is collapsing, nor that war is imminent, but that structural shifts inside the PLA are altering the risk landscape in subtle ways that demand disciplined strategic patience, credible deterrence, resilient alliances, and sustained investment in readiness, cyber resilience, space domain awareness, and rapid deployment logistics. Because in great power competition, misreading an opponent's internal transformation can be as costly as underestimating its arsenal. The Purge ultimately reflects Xi's determination to ensure absolute party control over the gun, reinforcing a doctrine that the military exists to safeguard regime security first and national ambition second, and that hierarchy shapes crisis decision-making, especially if domestic legitimacy becomes tied to demonstrating resolve abroad. American strategy, therefore, must assume that future confrontations will blend political signaling, military maneuvering, and information warfare in complex sequences rather than clear-cut escalatory ladders, and it must prepare for gray zone pressure, maritime militia activity, cyber disruptions, and economic coercion alongside conventional force posturing. And as Washington refines its approach, the objective remains stability through strength, not provocation through dominance. A calibrated posture that reassures allies, deters opportunism, and leaves space for de-escalation. Even amid rivalry, the story unfolding inside the PLA is not just about dismissed generals. It is about how power is centralized, how institutions respond to fear, and how strategic cultures evolve under pressure. And those dynamics will shape the next decade of U.S. defense planning across the Indo Pacific and beyond. So, the real question is not whether Xi's military purge matters. It is how prepared the United States is to adapt faster, think clearer, and maintain strategic balance in a world where internal political consolidation in one superpower can quietly redefine the security calculus of another. And if policymakers succeed, the outcome will be a stable deterrent equilibrium that discourages conflict while preserving American interests and allied confidence. But if they misjudge the signals, the cost of strategic complacency could echo far beyond the Pacific. Which is why understanding this purge is not an academic exercise. It is a necessary step shaping a security strategy capable of navigating uncertainty with disciplined foresight and resolve. And as this transformation continues, the United States must remain steady, vigilant, and strategically flexible. Because in an era defined by shifting power centers and opaque internal politics, clarity of purpose is the strongest defense of all. And that is the challenge and the opportunity now facing American security leadership.